My ex-girlfriend had a peculiar temper, willful, capricious, and prone to throwing tantrums. She wanted the whole world to revolve around her. And yet, I willingly played the role of her most humble simp. Every day, I was at her beck and call, providing endless emotional value. Why? Because my ex-girlfriend was loaded, a textbook young lady from a wealthy family. The best part, as long as I simped for her the right way, she was happy to spend money on me. Before long, I was driving a luxury car and living in a lavish mansion. What I didn't expect was that new flames always replace old ones. Her true love returned from abroad, and within days, he had her utterly mesmerized. On the day we broke up, I put on my most sycophantic smile and asked, "So, about the luxury car and mansion you gave me?" She curled her lips in disgust and scoffed, "Get lost, simp." The scorching sun beat down as I obediently took off, running at full speed. Property deed in hand. Chapter 1. I had been a simp since elementary school, one who was also extremely money-minded. My deskmate back then was rich, with a drawer full of cash and loose change every day. I became her personal bodyguard for $10 a day. Even when she went to the restroom, I would stand guard outside the girls' bathroom. Despite my young age, my piggy bank was overflowing with money. Later, she transferred schools, but thanks to my savings from that gig, I made it through elementary school without financial trouble. By the time I was in middle school, I had ventured into small business. During lunch breaks, I would buy a backpack full of snacks from the convenience store outside school and resell them at a markup during recess. The biggest spender in my class was a guy named David, a typical street-smart tough guy. He was incredibly generous, carrying a few $100 in pocket money every day. I never quite understood why, but during every break, he would spend dozens of dollars on snacks from me, only to distribute them to others for fun. By the end of recess, the floor would be littered with snack wrappers, and he would order me to clean up, paying me $20 per sweep. Naturally, I was diligent. Every day, I followed him around, running errands like a loyal lackey. Most students back then had little concept of money, but I did pretty well for myself. At my peak, I was making $300 a day. School kids' money was always the easiest to earn. People who hadn't experienced hardship had no idea of its value. I had no parents. I grew up alone, and from a young age, my only focus was making money. When I got to college, I worked like crazy to earn a living, juggling multiple part-time jobs from morning till night. And then, I met Willow. She was a rich girl through and through, spoiled, temperamental, and a reckless spender. What kind of person was Willow? She was the belle of the arts department, from a family that ran a jewelry business, a classic young lady. How did we meet? I was the head of the disciplinary committee, and this was the 12th time I had caught her skipping class. Her advisor, glaring at the attendance sheet, gritted his teeth and said, "Just because she's rich doesn't mean she gets a free pass. Don't bother covering for her." Since the instructor had spoken, I had no choice. I continued marking her absent every day. Eventually, right before the holidays, she stormed into my office. She looked down at me from her high horse and demanded, "What's the deal with you?" I sighed helplessly. "Sorry, there's nothing I can do." She scoffed. "Nothing you can do? Ever thought of finding a way?" She lounged on the couch, looking at me with irritation. In the end, I did find a way. I ran around campus, pulling some strings, and got her problem sorted out. Willow was very pleased with my loyal dog performance. Apparently, she was in such a good mood, and saw how poor I was, that she casually took off her bracelet and handed it to me. A $30,000 bracelet. I bowed to her with the utmost reverence and started greeting her morning and night. Then, one day, she asked me, "Are you trying to pursue me?" I cautiously replied, "Miss, do you not like me messaging you? I won't do it anymore if it bothers you." She said nothing for a long time. Then, finally, a message popped up. "Your name is George, right?" "Yes." "Do you know David?" "Yes, I do. He's failing a class too." I replied instantly, "Understood. I'll take care of it in the next couple of days." She responded, Thanks." Willow truly lived up to her wealthy upbringing. Immediately after, she sent me a $5,000 red packet. Generous as ever, I accepted it without hesitation and replied with a polite emoji. Perhaps it was because I had taken too much money from Willow, but when we later started dating, she often complained that I didn't provide enough emotional value. Her most common complaint was, "George, I paid for this. What else could I do?" Naturally, I had to improve my service quality. After all, I was in it for the money from the start. If she wanted to be a little spoiled and demanding, wasn't that only fair? Chapter 2. How did Willow and I start dating? It all goes back to David. Funny enough, he and I had quite the fate. We went to the same middle school, the same high school, and later even ended up at the same university. But after college started, our majors were completely different, so we rarely crossed paths. If we happened to run into each other, we'd nod in acknowledgement, but that was about it. Then one night, deep into the late hours, Willow called me. "Do you have a car?" she asked. "I do," I replied. She told me she was drunk and couldn't drive, then casually sent me a red packet and told me to come pick her up. I rushed out in the middle of the night, on my battered little electric scooter. The moment Willow saw it, she burst into laughter. "This is my first time riding one of these." Scratching my head awkwardly, I offered, "Want me to call you a cab instead?" She pursed her lips. "Nah, cabs are uncomfortable. The scooter is fine, at least I can get some fresh air." I picked her up, but before we even got back to campus, the drunken antics began. Half crying, half muttering, she rambled, "He's so cruel." I mustered the courage to confess, and he didn't even consider it before rejecting me. Willow grew more and more upset, and before long, she simply hugged my waist and fell asleep against my back. I froze. I was just here to pick her up. Shouldn't there be an extra charge for being hugged like this? When we arrived, I leaned down to unbuckle her helmet. She lifted her head, her cheeks tinged red from the wind, her delicate features so stunning I couldn't look away. At that moment, my heart pounded wildly. My breathing grew unsteady. I had a sudden premonition. I was about to strike gold. Without hesitation, I blurted out, "How about, you just make me your boyfriend?" She rolled her eyes in disdain and didn't answer directly. Instead, she shoved a luxury car key into my hand and said, "My boyfriend can't be picking me up in something this shabby." Suppressing the grin threatening to break out on my face, I respectfully accepted the key and watched her head upstairs. Of course, I knew she had only agreed because she was upset and needed a rebound to make herself feel better. But so what? I was a tool, sure, but I was a tool with a salary. That night, I stared at the car key in my hand, growing happier the longer I looked. Eventually, I fell asleep grinning ear to ear. I had a girlfriend now, but only Willow and I knew about it. She never mentioned it, and neither did I. Whenever young lady summoned me, I was always at her service, not for love, but for the perks. Dating her didn't cost me a dime. In fact, she'd send me money, telling me to dress properly before meeting her. I had upgraded to a life of free meals and drinks. Sometimes, we'd dine at high-end restaurants. She sat there, eating gracefully, the picture of someone raised in luxury. No matter how exquisite the food was, she ate slowly, savoring every bite. She couldn't stand watching me devour my food. After just a few bites, she'd wrinkle her nose and scold, "Were you reincarnated from a starving ghost?" I had no comment. If she had ever been an orphan, she'd know I could be even hungrier. I chuckled sheepishly, slowed my pace, and took smaller bites. When I saw she was no longer annoyed, I quietly resumed my meal. At social gatherings, I kept a low profile, focusing entirely on eating, making silent profits. So to speak, if someone called my name, I'd look up, smile, and answer politely. Once they lost interest, I'd go back to eating. I was well behaved. On my birthday, Willow transferred me money, telling me to rent a yacht for the occasion. "Gotta keep up appearances," she said. So, I did. The yacht was massive, and the sea breeze was refreshing. I closed my eyes and made a silent wish. Willow rolled her eyes, let out a snort, and cut in. "What's the point of making a wish in your head? Just say it out loud." I hesitated for a moment before stating plainly, "I want to buy a house." She swept her long hair to one side and scolded, "Can't you be a little more ambitious?" Then, without missing a beat, she added, "It's just a house. I'll gift you one. We'll go for the transfer in 2 days. She lowered her gaze and continued scrolling through her phone, as if she had just casually mentioned the weather. The sunset at the dock was breathtaking. The evening breeze brushed past, and on impulse, I turned my head, suddenly wanting to kiss her. I didn't want the house. I could save up and buy that myself. Right now, I just wanted to kiss her. I had barely reached out to pull her into an embrace when she abruptly stood up. She had received a voice message. I didn't catch what it said, but she frowned slightly and muttered, "It's getting cold. Take me back." Night had fallen. Without waiting for my response, she got off the yacht and left in a hurry. Later, when I got back to the dorm, I found out that David had dislocated his shoulder while playing basketball and had been sent to the hospital. I leaned over just in time to see a photo someone had taken at the hospital. Willow was standing right there beside him. I suddenly remembered the cake I had left unfinished. After a long pause, I let out a yawn, grabbed my phone, and climbed into bed. Chapter 3. For a few days, Willow was busy, and I didn't message her either. Then came the day David was discharged from the hospital. Willow texted me, asking me to join her on an outing, a mountain hike. When we got there, I realized they had come in 2 cars, with exactly 8 people. I was the 9th. I froze for a moment. Everyone was already seated, and no one said a word. The awkwardness was almost tangible. But since I was already there, it felt even more awkward to turn around and leave. Willow glanced at me, frowned, and then shifted her gaze toward a nearby sightseeing shuttle. David reached out and grabbed my arm. "Hop in, man. We can squeeze together." He was sitting in the back seat, and there was a bit of space. But he had only just gotten out of the hospital and was clearly not feeling his best. I quickly shook my head and smiled. It's fine, I'll just take the shuttle. It goes all the way up anyway. David looked at me for a long moment before finally letting go. Their cars drove off, leaving me alone in a pavilion. It wasn't peak tourist season, so there weren't many people around, just me, waiting by myself. After a long while, the shuttle arrived. I boarded it, and by the time I reached the summit, the group had already started their cookout. They were all rich kids, second-generation wealthy types, most of whom I didn't really know. Maybe I dined with one or two of them before. I found a corner and sat there from noon until late afternoon. They were grilling skewers. Occasionally, someone passed me one, and with the nice view all around, I ate until I was half full before taking in the scenery. I thought it might be nice to go exploring with Willow. Trying to be helpful, I approached her with a smile, telling her I planned to walk around and asked if she wanted to join me. But she seemed preoccupied and wouldn't even look at me. She just shook her head. The mountain air was refreshing. Coming from an orphanage background, I rarely got the chance to travel or have fun. I wandered around for nearly an hour, guessing they'd be done eating soon. Then I headed back, but what greeted me was not what I expected. The campsite was empty. Everyone was gone. In that instant, I realized that no matter how thick-skinned you are, there's a limit to what you can endure. It was already dusk, and the shuttle had stopped running. I had no choice but to walk down the mountain. With the sun setting behind the hills, there I was, alone on the winding paths. Halfway down, my phone died. Hanging my head, I took it step by step. The path reminded me of the time I ran away from the orphanage as a child. Same dim light, same gradually blurring surroundings, until they vanished into an impenetrable darkness. I couldn't find my way home back then, and my father never returned. Lost in thought, I missed a step and nearly slipped off the edge. My heart hammered in my chest, and I blurted out, "Willow," but all I heard was my own echo reverberating through the mountains, followed by silence. I sighed, unable to fathom why she was acting so stubborn. Steeling myself, I got back up. The moonlight filtered through the darkness, guiding my way along the narrow trail. I walked the entire night, thinking all the while. When morning finally came, I spotted a bus stop. The driver helped me charge my phone a little, and he nearly jumped when he saw how disheveled I was. "What happened to you?" he asked, alarmed. "Did you get hurt on the mountain? Why didn't you call 911? I waved my dead phone. "I forgot to check the battery. It died on me," he sighed. "Next time, let your family know before you head out. If you go missing, they'll at least know to call the police." I had no one to call. Not really. I just smiled. "Right. Thanks, sir." Only when my phone finally powered on did I see Willow's message from the night before. "Well, keep wandering if you want. I'm leaving first." I let out a wry laugh, slumped into the back seat of the bus, and fell fast asleep. Chapter 4. We continued meeting up for dates and meals every few days, and I kept providing her with endless emotional support, until one day, she apparently remembered what she'd said on my birthday. She actually transferred the property ownership of a small apartment to me. It wasn't very large, 2 bedrooms and a living room. Never lived in, and probably worth next to nothing in Willow's eyes. But to me, the day I got the deed, I felt an overwhelming urge to kneel on the spot in gratitude. She rolled her eyes and muttered, "Is it that big of a deal? It's just a tiny apartment. Can't you have a bit more ambition?" I looked her in the eye and replied, "Willow, you just don't understand. I was still in the discipline committee at school, and she kept sending me red packets. Whenever she had no classes, I'd help Willow sign in so she wouldn't get in trouble for skipping. She didn't ask much of me, just that she avoid any more attendance issues. I took my job seriously. When the new year came around, as usual, everyone else went home. I didn't because, well, I had no home to return to. This year, however, I went to the little apartment. It was simply furnished, no TV or anything. So, I figured I'd head out before New Year's Day and buy one. While I was browsing in the electronics store, I ran into Willow. She'd brought her younger sister along, a cute little girl around 8 or 9 years old. Willow looked frazzled, on the verge of being driven crazy by her sister. The moment she spotted me, her eyes lit up. I hurried over, all sycophantic smiles. "Young lady, any instructions?" she asked. "Do you know how to fold paper cranes?" I nodded. "Piece of cake," she said. "Then teach her, will you?" Of course, I nodded eagerly. That's when I noticed the little girl holding a piece of paper. She looked so upset she was practically crying. But once she heard I could fold it for her, she handed the paper to me. It was just a regular piece of colored paper. I folded it, and with the paper crane in hand, the little girl dashed off to play with other children. Willow scowled. "What's so special about a cheap piece of colored paper?" I said. "If someone truly loves something, no matter how cheap it is, it's still a treasure." She let out a snort. "So, you're here shopping?" I smiled. "Yeah. Planning to buy a TV," she said. "Then take me along. I've got a card in my bag." With that, She handed me her purse and shopping bags to carry. The meaning was obvious. Young lady was going to buy me a TV. I accepted with gratitude flooding my chest. Thank you, Willow. She huffed proudly. The TV was great. Willow was great, too. Still, the two of us didn't quite qualify as boyfriend and girlfriend, maybe just friends, or acquaintances. I was a junior now, already 21. That New Year's Eve, I made dumplings all by myself and watched the fireworks outside. The street was full of young people running around with fireworks in hand. I mingled among them, carrying my own fireworks to the riverside and watching them light up the sky. Back at the orphanage, every New Year's Eve, we'd finish dinner early and head to bed. No one could sleep, though, because we all waited for midnight. When the fireworks started outside, we'd crowd around the small window and watch. At first, only one kid would cry. Then, everyone would start crying silently, tears tracking down our faces as we gazed outside. We didn't want to upset the caregivers who looked after us, but deep down, we still missed home. Now, watching the fireworks here, my eyes grew misty again. All around me, people laughed and celebrated as the sky lit up. I closed my eyes, smiling to myself. Just then, someone tugged at my sleeve. I glanced down. It was Willow's little sister, Sophia. She clutched a toy tiger, wearing a little tiger hat, her eyes bright as stars. In a childlike voice, she said, "Big brother who folds paper cranes." I asked, "What's your name? Where's your sister?" I lifted her into my arms. She replied, "My name is Sophia. My sister's over there." Following her gaze, I saw a familiar group of people, the same crowd from our mountain trip. Willow stood in the middle of them, looking so happy. They'd bought loads of fireworks, painting the night sky red. The display was grand, and I could have joined in. I set Sophia down, made sure she ran back to the group, then backed away and left. On New Year's morning, around noon, someone knocked at my door, waking me up. It was Willow. She pushed Sophia toward me. She insisted on coming to wish you a happy new year. I was speechless. Sophia, looking up at me, said, "Happy New Year, big brother." I never expected anyone would come to give me a New Year's greeting. After rummaging around, all I could find was a piece of red paper to fold into a makeshift red envelope for her. They still hadn't left when another knock sounded at the door. Turns out, there were quite a few visitors on New Year's Day. The moment I opened up, someone threw herself into my arms. "Brother," she squealed. "Did you miss me? I missed you so much." She clung to me, practically wrapping herself around me. I couldn't shake her off quickly enough. "Anna, let go," she huffed. "No way," I said. "There are people here." Reluctantly, Anna released me. She glanced into the room, saw Willow holding Sophia, and after a quick pause, stared at me in disbelief. "George, did you marry a divorced single mom?" "What the heck?" I was speechless. "Don't be ridiculous. Even I'm not that audacious." Willow puffed her cheeks in anger. "Are you calling me old?" Anna rolled her eyes and leaned toward me, whispering, "Who is she, George?" That bossy tone. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was your mom. I was at a total loss for words. Chapter 5. I rubbed my temples and explained. "This is my friend, Willow, and her little sister, Sophia. And this is Anna, who's my adopted kid sister from the orphanage. We're as close as real siblings." Anna pouted. "Brother, why is it a biological sister? Can't I be a lover sister instead?" I replied, "No, you can't. I'm not interested in pretentious coquettes." She poked my arm. "Come on, interests can be developed. Don't walk away." "Brother, what's for lunch? I took an overnight train and I'm so tired and hungry." "Brother," I said, "go sit at the table for a bit. 3 minutes. I'll heat something in the microwave and bring it to you." She insisted. "No way. You might burn your hands in the microwave, and then I'd feel sorry for you. I'll get it myself." I was speechless. Scram, scram, scram. I bought heat-resistant gloves. Willow watched us from the kitchen doorway for a while, then left with Sophia in her arms. After eating, Anna happily went off to sleep. In my room, I hadn't bought any bedding except for my own. Right now it was the only bedroom set up for someone to stay in. I hadn't expected Anna to come. Our universities are so far apart, one in the south, one in the north, and she would have to transfer between 4 different trains to get here. Tickets around New Year's are hard to come by. Every year, I'd call her, and she'd always say she couldn't make the trip. This year, when I called, she said she couldn't get a ticket, and yet here she was now. So on New Year's Day, she just showed up. 3 years had passed since we last met. The once little girl had changed a lot. She was more beautiful now. But to me, she was still that same child. On New Year's Day, some big stores were already open. I went out and bought a comforter and a 4-piece bedding set. The total cost was nearly $2,000. My heart ached just thinking about it. But Anna's bedding had to be decent. She has allergies. I remember her first day at the orphanage. She was assigned the bed next to mine, and I was told to look after her. She ended up having an allergic reaction in the middle of the night. In the morning, I looked at the girl beside me, swollen like a pig. completely dumbfounded. After a moment, I finally reacted and hurriedly carried her out the door. They said she was allergic to the bedding and almost suffocated. After that, Anna got her own special quilt that no one else could touch, except me, because as a little kid, she didn't know how to wash or air out her blankets. Maybe it was because I carried her to the hospital that night, but ever since, she's been especially clingy toward me. She's allergic to practically everything, except me. It was like she was glued to my side, refusing to be separated. When she was small, it was okay to hold her, but now she's grown up. It's not exactly appropriate for her to hang off me all day. Anna woke around 8 in the evening, stumbling out to find me, half asleep. The moment she saw me, she instinctively tried to snuggle into my arms, and I had to push her away to remind her of her surroundings. Brother, good evening, she said. Heat up your own food, I told her. Remember to wear the microwave gloves. Your room is next door, she asked. Brother, do you want to check my suitcase? I frowned. Why? She said, I brought you a present I made myself. Curious, I opened her small suitcase. Inside was a neatly folded scarf. Brother, Happy New Year, she said. I looked at the scarf and smiled. Happy New Year, she added. There's also a bank card hidden inside. The pin is your birthday. Confused, I blurted. Why are you giving me this? What are you trying to do? It's really not necessary, she insisted. Brother, you must take it. It might not mean much to you, but it's very important to me. It's not because I'm in love with you. It's because if you ever want to get married but can't afford the dowry, at least I could help. Even if you don't marry me, I'll always be your family. Brother, I haven't visited you all this time because I didn't have the money. I was afraid I couldn't gather enough for your bride price and wouldn't dare see you. Brother, finally, I can come. It's been years. I've missed you so much. Biting my lip, I said, take your card and get back to your own room. She teared up, choking on her words. Brother, are you planning to give me the bride price? That's so touching. I was speechless, my head buzzing. Finally, I pinched the bridge of my nose and warned, if you keep up this act, you're not getting any dinner. Chapter 6. Anna stayed with me for a while. I took her shopping for more clothes. She needs custom fabrics. Not out of vanity but because custom materials are more stable for her allergies. Compared to most people, she's the real young lady in terms of delicate constitution. This was the 7th time this year that I'd run into Willow at the mall. By now, I'd gotten used to it. She looked at me, lips pressed tightly together. Anna didn't like her. The moment she saw Willow, she muttered, all she does is sulk and throw a fit. Bro, how much do you owe her? If it's too much, I'll just sell myself to pay it back for you. It must be tough dealing with someone who's basically a walking balloon of anger. I frowned. Shut up. She gave me a place to live, our current place. Anna gave a snort. So what? We can earn our own money, save up, and buy one ourselves. If it's not working out, just give it back. I shook my head. Close your mouth. Your brother practically risked his life for that apartment. I went on that mountain trip with her and ended up walking all night in the hills, nearly dying in the process. I earned that place. Anna's eyes trembled slightly. Bro, just wait for me. My friend and I have started streaming, and it's finally taking off. Once I become a big influencer, we can buy our own place. No problem. Willow watched us whispering, heads close together, and couldn't help but ask, why do you have to huddle so close just to talk? Anna mumbled under her breath, we're trash talking you, but then she looked up with a bright smile. Willow, sometimes it's better not to be too dramatic. If you're upset, say so instead of making others guess. My brother has night blindness. Making him walk around in the dark all night was too dangerous. Willow froze for a moment. Since when did he? She stopped midway, turned to look at me, and pressed her lips together without finishing her question. Anna, however, tightened her grip on Willow's arm and went on. Willow, thank you for all your help lately. Is there anything you like? I'd be happy to buy it for you. Willow shook her head. I don't need anything. Her expression darkened, but Anna didn't get angry. She just smiled and said, well, at least add me on social media. My brother's going to be busy soon, so if you need anything, you can find me. Anna was due back at school soon. Before leaving, she dawdled for ages at the door, and even after entering the station, she kept turning back. Brother, remember me? Okay. I went up to give her a hug. She froze for a second, staring at me. Brother, is that your way of responding to my feelings? I didn't answer. I just slipped her bank card back into her pocket. After a long pause, she finally hugged me back. Only when she'd passed through security did I point to her pocket. She reached in, went stiff, and gave me a wounded look. Brother, come back here, take the card. Brother, don't go. Excuse me, sir, can I go through just once more? Brother, look at me. I pretended not to hear and strode off. Not seeing Anna might have been easier. When we're apart, we share a few things and occasionally think of each other, but the emotions aren't so heavy. Once we see each other, though, goodbyes become impossible to bear. No matter what I do, I can't stop the ache in my chest when we part. As it turns out, Anna's bank account holds a whopping $880,000. Apparently, she never spent a single cent of the money I'd given her. Chapter 7. After Anna left, my new semester started. Since I was planning to go to graduate school, I decided to resign from my position as department head. I thought of Willow and specifically reached out to let her know. After all, the red envelopes she used to send me wouldn't work anymore. She'd need to contact our advisor or someone else if she needed help. It took her a long time to reply with a single word, okay. That was it. I didn't think much of it. Willow stayed out of touch for a long while. Then one day, I heard she had started dating someone. I assumed it might be David, but it turned out it wasn't. Apparently, she was seeing someone within her circle of wealthy second-generation friends. I wanted to confirm one last thing, so I took my property deed and went to see her. At the time, Willow was in the yard of a villa having afternoon tea. There was a man by her side, and when he saw me, he frowned. I hesitated about this apartment. Willow bit her lip. George, did you come here just to talk about that? I wavered. Not only that, also the car you used to have your boyfriend pick you up with back when we spent time together. Since we were never really together, it doesn't feel right for me to keep it. George. She was genuinely furious. Her face turned bright red, and she practically exploded. You came to me now just to burn all bridges. I answered quietly, no, that's not it. She fumed. I don't want to see you right now. Could you just leave? I froze for a moment. Then, after a long pause, I said, sure. So I left with the deed. On the way home, I decided that place was basically my humiliating payoff. If I keep being a loser, the only thing I'll win is the biggest loser award. Clutching the property deed, I headed home happily. If I didn't keep it now, I'd never get anything later. Even selling the apartment would net me $1 million or so, enough to buy Anna a ring someday. Later, around graduation, I bumped into Willow again. She was wearing a beautiful graduation gown. As we passed each other, she grabbed my sleeve. She asked, George, was there ever a moment when you actually liked me, just because you liked me, not for my money? I thought for a moment, then sighed. Willow, the truth is, you're liked because of your money. She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I replied, Willow, you're generous. That's how I could ignore all the insults and tantrums you threw. If it weren't for your money, who could put up with everything you do, especially the way you have no boundaries with other guys? Who'd want to be with someone if they're always afraid of being cheated on? To be honest, when a woman willingly spends money on a man, it often creates the illusion that she must be head over heels in love with him. So, when you gave me those things, I fell for that illusion. I thought you had to like me, but I soon understood that none of it really mattered to you. You just don't have a sense of money. It was like throwing a bone to a dog. I get it, but real love shouldn't be like that. Real love isn't about feeling like the other person owes you, so you can throw a tantrum anytime, anywhere, without caring about their feelings. Even when I was stranded on that mountain all night, you didn't realize anything was wrong. I hardly know anyone in the city, and the moment I nearly slipped down the mountainside, the first person I thought of was you. I kept telling myself Willow was just acting spoiled and would come find me if I didn't call for a whole night. Maybe my phone died and we missed each other's messages. But the more I walked, the more disappointed and chilled I felt. By dawn, when I saw the bus station, it finally sank in. We were only in it for what we could get from each other. Willow held onto my hand and didn't let go, wrinkling my sleeve, and I heard her soft, tearful explanation. I'm not. I cut her off. Willow, after graduation, I'm going to get married. I'll send you an invitation. Please do come. She looked up at me, her expression blank, as though in a daze. After a long moment, she finally answered, all right. Chapter 8, Extra Willow. George is getting married. At his wedding, I watched him marry someone else. He said she was his childhood friend, but if we're talking about who met him first, that girl couldn't have beaten me. The first time I actually met George wasn't in college, it was back in 2nd grade. It was sometime in the 90s. My family was still building up its business then and nowhere near as wealthy as we are now. My parents were always busy, so they'd just stuff wads of pocket money into my hands and tell me to buy my own snacks. When they moved inland for work, they transferred me to a local public elementary school. People there weren't exactly friendly. Or to put it another way, they bullied me. My mom and dad never came to pick me up, so I was an easy target. After having my money taken several times, I told my deskmate about it. That deskmate's name was George. Not someone with the same name, the George, the one who acted all quiet and well-behaved on the surface but would go behind people's backs with a brick in hand. He told me he could protect me. The first time he got into a fight for my sake, I paid him 20 yuan. After school that day, he grabbed a brick and got into it with those boys. By the end, he had a foot on one of them, was holding 2 more by the shirt, and forced them to apologize before letting them go. Then he went home happy with the 20 yuan I gave him. The second time he fought, I paid him 80. Not because he demanded more but because that time, he pulled off something even bolder. Those bullies had enlisted some local dropouts to ambush me outside the school gates. I was still just a little kid, and I felt sure my life was over. I was terrified. Then George showed up again, wielding a toilet scooper from the bathroom used for cleaning out waste. At first, he only threatened them with it, swinging it around. So they kept their distance, but they wouldn't actually back off or let us leave. Finally, George got fed up, went straight into the bathroom, and scooped out a heaping ladle of human waste. The group freaked out, all yelling, "Don't come any closer." He didn't. He just started flinging it at them. The stench, that day, the entire school erupted. The administration told everyone to bring a parent in. That's when George looked at the teacher and said with a smile, "I can write as many self-criticisms as you need, but I'm from the orphanage. I don't have parents." I froze. That was the moment I realized, he's an orphan. I tried to defend him, saying he was just being heroic. My parents arrived, and they said the same thing. In the end, George didn't have to write any self-criticisms or call any parents. Instead, he got a 500 yuan reward. Granted, that reward came from my family's pocket. Afterward, George came back to me and asked if I could keep paying him to be my bodyguard. I asked, "But didn't I just give you 500? He shook his head. The school handed that money straight to the orphanage. I'll never see any of it. So I went on a spree of buying snacks and meals for him, giving him plenty of money. But soon after, I had to transfer schools. Before transferring, I found a neighbor and gave him my favorite toy, asking him to look after George for me. That neighbor's name was David, and he really did keep an eye on George. As for me, I went abroad for a long time, long enough that I nearly forgot all of this. I left the country at 9 years old and didn't come back until I was 18. By then, I felt completely out of touch with everything here. Unlike most people, I never took the 9-year Gaokao track. I was an exchange student. I always felt above everything here. I skipped classes, until they told me I might not graduate. My dad scolded me. So in the end, I showed up at the student council. That's when I saw him. At first, I only felt he looked familiar. That memory was buried deep inside me. I couldn't quite place it. All I could see was that he loved money, exactly the kind of person I hated most. And yet, something about him intrigued me. I looked for excuses to see him. Watching him eat made me weirdly happy. I remember being really happy, too. On the night we celebrated his birthday, the moment he looked at me, my cheeks warmed up. My heart felt like he'd pulled on it, throwing it off beat. George took on a bunch of part-time jobs, but his grades never seemed to slip. He was amazing, good at everything, handling problems quickly and efficiently. He always had solutions. I'll never match that, no matter what. I realized how capable he was. But I got mad at him anyway. Why couldn't he just dedicate himself to cheering me up? Why care so much about studying and working? But I never said a word. I wanted him to figure out my feelings on his own. During that mountain trip, I was in some inexplicable snit. If he was so capable, he could have just stayed strong and come after me. I was waiting for him to realize I was upset and come coax me to make up. I never considered that his phone battery might have died, or that he'd end up spending the whole night alone in the darkness of the mountain. After that day, he seemed to drift further and further away from me. He never looked at me the same way again. But I thought, this jerk loves luxury cars and fancy homes best. So giving him an apartment should be the easiest way to hold on to him. He owed me. I threw him a bone. So he should keep groveling at my feet, right? Yet he didn't. Not one bit. Then he tried to give the apartment back, which made me even angrier. He wasn't just returning the apartment. He was telling me he wanted a clean break, severing all ties. But I didn't want things that clear-cut. I wanted to keep him entangled. Because as long as that apartment stayed in his name, I still had a chance. Then he went and got married. Still, the apartment was in his hands. If his marriage failed one day, maybe I could step in as the homewrecker. Except he bought himself a new place. And that girl Anna even rented out the apartment I gave him. Chapter 9, Extra, Anna. New Year's, Chinese New Year's Eve. 10:07 a.m. I set off to give my brother a surprise. First day of the Lunar New Year. 1:40 p.m. Darn it. I arrived at my brother's place and found a woman there, with a kid. Scared me half to death. Let me hug my brother to calm down. In the living room. Huh? What's this? It's my dearest brother. Might as well hug him. In the kitchen. Huh? What's this? It's my dearest brother. Might as well hug him again. In the bedroom. Huh? What's this? It's my dearest brother. Another hug can't hurt. Heading out the door. Huh? What's this? It's my dearest brother. One more hug, please. My brother. My very own brother. The past. My parents aren't dead, they just didn't want me because I'm prone to allergies. They threw me away. I got lost and couldn't find my way home. So someone took me to the orphanage. It was my first time there, and I stared at everything in fear. The staff were busy, so they handed me off to a boy who was about my age. That night, I broke out in hives, red, itchy, and painful, but I tried to tough it out. Eventually, I felt like I couldn't breathe, like my mind was shutting down. By morning, someone was lifting me. That boy shouted, She looks like she's having an allergic reaction. Call 120. I tried to force my eyes open but couldn't. I reached out and grabbed a bit of his shirt. Don't abandon me. I won't do it again. He patted me, saying, I won't leave you behind. The ambulance will be here soon. I'll take you to the hospital, and everything will be okay. When I came to, I was already in the hospital with my brother by my side. I reached out for his sleeve and fell back into a peaceful sleep. Later on, they bought me a set of pure silk sheets and blankets. My brother teased me for being fussy, reminding me that silk had to be hand-washed. He taught me how to wash them carefully, little by little. But since there was only one set of silk bedding, when it was being washed, there was nowhere else for me to sleep. So I snuck into my brother's bed in the middle of the night, and didn't have any allergic reactions. It was strange. Somehow if it was my brother's bed, I'd be fine. Even hugging my brother didn't trigger anything. Later the doctor suggested it might be psychological, but I don't believe it. I just feel like my brother is my savior, the one who came to rescue me. My good brother, my hero. Marriage, brother, hug me, please. Baby wants a hug. George replies. Anna, you're 22 now. I pout. What does a hug have to do with age? George asks. Then what does it have to do with? He pushes me away, but I don't give up. I say. It's about how much I feel like being hugged by you in this moment. Brother, guess what? I've prepared a lot of clothes. What clothes? I grin. You'll find out when you marry me. Chapter 10, Extra, David. Purely David's perspective does not represent an omniscient viewpoint. Willow, what the hell is your problem? Even a dog wouldn't want you. So why the hell are you crying? Just because she's a woman. I'm not allowed to reject her confession. Does she really think having a bit of money makes her some kind of white, rich, and beautiful young lady that everyone automatically falls for? What a total yandere. She's always picking fights and playing the moral coercion card. One little disagreement and she's instantly mad. Then turns around saying she's a hopeless romantic who's bound to get scammed by men. Hopeless romantic. My ass. She's dated 18 boyfriends in a single year. Doesn't that make her clueless beyond belief? If I had to date someone like that, I'd charge for emotional damages. Otherwise, I'd be the sucker here. No way I'd ever want a girl like that. Even if she paid me. She can only dangle money in front of George just because he's an orphan. But trust me, if anything actually goes down, George can run off faster than anyone. That clueless brat should just rot away alone. She knew there were only 8 seats on that trip, but she still insisted on dragging George along so he'd have to ride the sightseeing shuttle by himself. Who gave her the right to humiliate him like that? And leaving him up in the mountains, she clearly told everyone else to go so she could force George to stay behind. Just for the sake of throwing a tantrum and making him apologize and coax her. Did she ever even see him as a human being? That's some twisted mind game right there. I tried calling George 16 times, and then I found out he'd canceled his high school phone number ages ago. But my family does business with Willows, so I couldn't just tell her off. It nearly drove me insane. When I heard George finally got back safely, I could at least breathe easier. A word of caution, don't be fooled by that pampered princess's good looks. If you stick around, you'll end up her simp. The minute something feels off, run. If she tries to mess with your head, fight back. Magic against magic, you know. She never reflects on her own behavior. All she does is gross people out. If you hesitate, you'll be stuck disgusted for life. I have trypophobia, and I really can't stand people who are full of schemes. And now she's acting all pitiful, waiting for George. A piece of work like her can't even sort out her own mess. She still has to chase after George. Well, George could marry 6 times over, and it still wouldn't be her turn.